I'm excited to introduce you to Annie Phillips from LUMN Consulting, who does extraordinary work around innovation and strategy. Do you want to tell us, welcome to the podcast, Annie, and tell us more about what you do?
Thanks so much for having me, Kate. It's a delight to be on this podcast. We've spoken a couple of times before, and
Yeah.
I'm just really excited about what the Huddle's doing. Just helping leaders think through what leadership is. And that's a lot of what we're doing at LUMN Consulting. So we work alongside leaders of missional movements, so nonprofits, churches, even some kind of like innovation and entrepreneurial ventures, and helping to essentially bridge that gap between vision to action. A lot of people have really great ideas, and I founded LUMN on the premise that there's plenty of ideas in the world, but I think there's a great need for people who can actually bridge that gap and take really great ideas and help bring them to execution without losing what's compelling about them in the first place. And so that's what we get to do with a bunch of different leaders in different spaces.
That's really exciting. I imagine, as somebody who's tried to get things off the ground from time to time, apart from the fact that I can have too many ideas at once, is that it's not easy to get things off the ground, that sometimes you can have a thought and it could be a brilliant thought, but it's really different to execution, taking something from thought to execution.
Yeah, and there are a lot of ideas and thoughts that actually aren't great ideas. And so it's being able to kind of identify and work with the ideas that do have feet and have kind of credibility and something behind them that goes, oh, actually this is compelling. Like, what does it look like for us to then help that idea actually get off the ground? And I think there's kind of a process that we go through with LUMN to help with this. It's doing like discerning, designing and delivering, and that discernment process I think is really like key. I think with visionary leaders it's really easy to just be like, oh, like I have this idea and I have this idea, and I love that, but there's also a process that you kind of need to go through up front to actually do the listening and help them even process, almost like as a soundboard, process what they're thinking, where the idea is feasible, who the stakeholders, what are the timings on delivery, and what's actually possible in their specific context. Because I think a lot of consulting companies kind of come in and they're just like, okay, great, you have this project, we'll like deliver the perfect deck and then we'll hand it over and then you guys can run with it. And I think, I have a real heart for like helping leaders kind of do that beginning phase through to delivery such that it actually becomes a sustainable project, and that there's like capacity building and capability built into the organization as you actually hand over something just to be operationalized as part of the organization. And so that discernment phase up front is really key in tailoring, like just helping leaders, one, process, but two, tailoring the solutions and the projects to their specific environment. And I learned that, I don't know, Kate, in working with lots of organizations, you start to realize, I think there's a perfect pathway and there's an ideal, there's ideal policies and there's ideal infrastructure and systems, but ultimately organizations are made up of people, and you really have to work with the people who are already there, the systems that they're used to operating in and with, because otherwise you can put something on their desk and at the end of the day, like, they're not going to kind of implement that project or adopt a change if it doesn't at least have some synergies with the way that they're used to operating.
And do you see leaders potentially unintentionally burning out their people because they are so, they've got so many great ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I have probably, I think, a really kind of good example of, the work that I used to do before this was over in London, and I worked for a really big visionary who has just managed to pull off some like really, really incredible projects. Specifically, the work that I was doing was heading up as executive director of an organization called Renaissance. And it was designed to equip creatives and entrepreneurs in creativity. So really trying to relate to the younger generation, equip them, and send them out. And we had a framework around, encounter the creator, equip the creative, and empower the local church to be cathedrals of creativity. in that space, that when you're working with creatives, there's so many different ideas that get thrown at you. And I think the thing that I've learned from working with a whole range of visionaries, like typically I'm the person who's less at 2IC because they're usually like chief of staff, but I'm usually the person who's, internally helping them, articulate their vision and actually get the execution off the ground. There's the visionaries who are the most successful, I've found, are actually those who have real clarity around what their vision is. Often it's just really simple. So it's a kind of vision that is easily articulated. It's something that can be articulated by the executive in the organization and by the cleaners in the organization. It's also a vision that people, are able to just like articulate over and over again. And it still has, I guess it's still like people, it's big enough that people still buy into it, even when they've heard it repeated 100 times. And they're like, actually, yes, I want to buy into this. I believe in this. This is worth chasing after. And I think the other aspect to it is that it's like big enough that people can get behind it. So I think ideas and vision, ideas follow vision. So where you have real clear vision, you're actually more like you're setting up your people to be able to filter through the ideas that are good and bad, that lead us in the direction of the vision, or are kind of outside of the wheel, as we used to call it in another organization I worked in. And that would just keep us kind of grounded as a team to say, is it on the wheel? Because there's so many ideas that kind of come up as you go. There's lots of different clients who want to pull you in different directions, with new kind of products and things that they're interested in. And coming back to this is what we're doing. This is our, whether it be a 10-year vision, a 5-year vision, and it helps you to kind of filter through some of those ideas that come up, because there's like clarity, not just, in the executive in the organization, but also, in the team who are, day in, day out, the operational team.
Yeah. I always think that clarity is one of the most profound gifts that leaders can give to their team, because it reduces stress enormously, because it makes it really easy to determine what priorities are and what good looks like. And you don't waste a lot of time spinning wheels trying to work it out. You already know. It is such a gift.
Yeah, I wonder if, some of the missional drift or the like organizational drift that we've seen. I think there's a lot of institutions in Australia at the moment who it's not clear why they still exist. Like, I think there's some of the challenges internally, and the confusion and the complexity that's like built up over time as these organizations have expanded, has been like I don't think size or complexity per se should actually mean that, there isn't clarity about the direction in which the organization's going. But if you can't articulate why the organization exists from the top to the bottom, then it's much more difficult to steer the organization and for people to have buy-in to the purpose if the why is not clear. And simplicity and clarity are like two of the, I think, elements in making sure that actually organizations, regardless of the size you grow to, actually have clarity in where you're going, in the direction you're going in.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. It's interesting, isn't it? Losing their way, and yet they exist, and they're big, and so they just sort of keep going.
Yeah.
Despite that lack of clarity of vision.
Mm.
Which then makes it, and this is where I think a lot of conflict comes from, because then people, when they don't have a purpose, when it's not a clear vision, when we're just doing a job for the sake of doing the job, it's not very rewarding.
No. No, and I think that comes back to purpose, right? Like there's this bigger question of, when you do run an organization that is full of people, it's like, what is the purpose that you are instilling in the organization, such that people do have buy-in? And I think we've talked about this previously in terms of the next generation coming through, and some of the questions and tensions that are coming up in organizations as leaders are, starting to work with the next generation. There's all these questions around, okay, we've got the baby boomers who are starting to retire, Gen X, the millennials, and Gen Z. And a lot of the conversations and tensions in the workplace at the moment feel like they are emerging around Generation Z and going, they have different expectations, in terms of the flexibility around work and pay. And yeah, there's just like some interesting questions around how do you actually deal with those tensions when different generations actually have different expectations of what work is and the purpose in which it's, because I think for all of us, there's an inherent desire to find purpose in the things that we do and work. We kind of spend a huge amount of our week doing. And so there's some tensions that organizations now need to grapple with, particularly as each generation kind of is dealing with a rate of change that means that the generational gap feels larger, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think that's very true. And I think what's really interesting is that we might perceive, particularly as a boomer saying this, but it would be easy to perceive that somebody's resistance to working longer hours or something as being an entitlement or position or whatever, when in fact we're making a big assumption about somebody's intentions in that moment. And I see this all the time. I see lots and lots of symptoms, but we don't always understand the cause, and we don't actually even explore it. We don't even ask. We just go, oh, that's young people, or that's, so-and-so, they're so entitled. And we use very dismissive and critical language without any curiosity at all. I think it's a fascinating world we live in right now.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. Through my work at Renaissance, I spend a lot of time with young people, and usually kind of between the ages, at Saint, but Renaissance, and between the ages of 18 to about 35, epically creative. Like, this is the most creative generation that we've had because, they've grown up with Instagram and, they can create with like the touch, they've got screens in front of them all of the time. And yeah, I think there's an opportunity to kind of tap into and understand the next generation. And I've been really encouraged to see, like, I wonder, one of the questions, that is in my mind is like, I wonder how much untapped potential there is actually in organizations, because we've kind of put forward a job description and we're like, but this person is fulfilling a job description, instead of seeing, people as a whole and young people as a whole, to say, what is it that you like? What are you passionate about? People have stepped into our organization. Young people are looking for purpose and fulfillment. And I think we can see that more now than ever in the way that, they're less likely to drink. They're much more like purpose driven around campaigning. And we've seen that in like climate action, like that. But I just wonder like what opportunities exist within the organizations that we're running at the moment that we haven't asked the question of the next generation through. It's like, what is it like that drives you? Like, you've jumped on board with our for a reason. What other skills do you possess? What do you think might be possible? And what kind of problem solving do you think we could do to actually like help us as an organization function better? And I just wonder what that would actually unlock in our organizations.
Yeah, I agree. I think the opportunities are extraordinary if we got out of our own way and stopped making assumptions about people's intentions and asked what drives you, what gets you out of bed in the morning. We're working on this project. What excites you about this project? What could we do better? I think we live in a world right now that goes so fast that we don't actually sharpen the knife before we do a whole lot of stuff. We just keep going and doing the task without getting really clear and getting our house in order to make that project or that task as efficient as possible. I think we waste a lot of energy. We spin our wheels. And I agree, so much untapped potential.
When you're working with leaders, what's the posture towards creativity? Because this is one kind of question that I've got in terms of how like the opportunities for creativity and innovation within organizations. I've found that it's quite different, the appetite for that between London and coming back to Australia earlier this year. And it's something that I'm really passionate about, and just like helping leaders think through, okay, like, what is it that we can do differently? Are there different opportunities? Can we look at a different way to do that, or there might be other people who we can bring into the fold to actually help unlock opportunities there. What is like, have you seen in terms of the like appetite for creativity?
I think that there is an appetite, but I think particularly when you talk about leaders over the age of 50, etc., that there's some built-in sort of processes and systems around how to do things, and so it's not a comfortable space because it sort of goes against the rules, or they haven't even thought about it. Like, it just hasn't even come into their head to think about we could do this differently. And there's always going to be there's often in workplaces somebody saying we've tried that, it didn't work, or there's always that. But I think, and leaders often want to change that scenario, but I think because of the speed with which people are going, I think there is a fear of, I've got to meet KPIs, I've got this demand, I've got all these pressures. We can't afford to do that now. We have to wait until things slow down. But the problem is things never slow down. I can't tell you the number of times people have said to me, we'll try that in the new year because that's when things will slow down. And then it never slows down. So they put off the opportunity to be more creative, or to look at different processes or systems or whatever, or to ask people, like, what could we do differently here? And yet when they do, they are always, I always say to people, your staff have got lots and lots of opinions that they'd love to share with you if you made it safe for them to share it.
Yeah.
They care deeply. Your people in your team care deeply. They want this to work well. Give them the space to be able to contribute in a meaningful way.
And often they're the best to contribute these ideas, right? They're kind of stuck in the mundanity of the week and, trying to think through and push forward with the agendas that you're placing in front of them. And so they see the barriers and the opportunities and can often best place to identify, actually, this is like the best way that we could do this. And it's almost carving out, I think about this even in terms of, like work-life balance. You often only achieve work-life balance when you schedule the fun and the time to catch up with people, and I think in this way in organizations where I've seen it done the best is actually it has to be put in the diary. If you put aside time to have a day away, that's a strategy day or an innovation day, or you can just get an hour and you say, this is the meeting that anything's on the table. There's a really great book actually called Creativity Inc. and it's by Ed Catmull, and he is one of the co-founders of Pixar, and now they built their teams, were really quite successful, and then took over Disney as well and turned Disney around. And he talks in detail, I highly recommend the book because he talks in detail about building creative teams and building in creativity and trust. And I think the chapter that always stands out to me is around the way in which they run their meetings. So they'll often have, if you're producing an animation film, you will often have maybe 30, 40 people in the room because they all have different roles in the production process. And so, but because of the level of detail and granularity that they're having to get to in those meetings, and it might be literally that girl's hand moved too fast. It doesn't, it doesn't suggest affection, and it suggests she's angry. They have to really get down to the detail. They had to really build this environment of trust where people didn't feel personally attacked when someone said, no, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
And it's phenomenal, what they've been able to do in the quality of the films that they've produced by taking on this process and helping just build a high level of trust and excellence within their teams. And I just think of that when when we're having this conversation, going what could be possible when you actually kind of carve out the time and you put aside and you're really strategic about how you actually run different meetings for different purposes, so that you actually get the most out of your organizations.
Yeah. I had a conversation recently with this wonderful leader around engagement, and he's from the Netherlands, talking around using story to build trust. So we have meetings, and he said KPIs are important, we shouldn't forget them, but why don't we start with stories and finish with KPIs, rather than what we often do in meetings is we start with KPIs and we never get to the stories. And I loved that, and it resonates beautifully with me in that when through story we have that opportunity to build trust, because it's easier for us to reflect our intentions and our goodwill and all of those things. Whereas when we put, it's like email, when you put something just on paper as a stat or whatever, it doesn't have tone and context. And so just spending time together so that we can call things out, so we can trust each other and know that people's intentions are good and they're not out. This is not a gotcha moment, and it's not a, you're in trouble moment. It's part of our humanity. Like, of course it's not perfect, because that's okay. Like, but yeah, it's, the building of trust is a really interesting one, because you can also force social time, and sometimes that doesn't work at all, because it's like, you will now have fun. And it doesn't always go down well either.
Yeah. There's like forced fun moments in meetings and you're like all looking at each other wondering who's going to put their foot out first. Yeah. It's like, I think also what you're getting at is like I was going to say, I think what you're getting at is like the difference between head and heart. And this is actually a really long time to understand in organizations. Like I remember like my first job, I kind of walked in and was like, it's about productivity and efficiency, and, failed to adopt that posture of like, we're a team. And it's not that I work as part of the team. It was just that I really saw a separation between life and work. And I actually think that that's probably one of the mistakes that we've made, is actually, yes, we want to be able to like strike a balance, but if people are finding purpose in their work and there's a compelling vision and purpose around what you're doing, then actually you're less concerned about hard edges and a definitive between them, because actually you have friends at work that you enjoy working with and you are working on purposeful projects together. And I think like my posture has changed a lot over the years, and a lot of like that has been around storytelling and like seeing the power of the buy-in that you have when someone actually starts to get to the heart of what the organization's trying to do. And they take you on a journey of saying, okay, like, this is, these are the people that we're trying to impact. This is not just about like pumping out X number of projects. Yes, that's an important thing to do for our bottom line, but ultimately the best. And I wonder if this is to do with leadership as well. It's like how we actually set people to succeed. And I think organizations that have longevity are the ones that are more relational, that are, more interested in like outcomes from a people perspective than they are around the numbers and the bottom line. And you can do both, but ultimately I think that makes sense.
I think if you are really clear about your vision and your vision has a clear purpose, then you're going to attract the people that have the values that reflect the vision and the purpose. And so then it's easier to get the alignment. It's easier then to build trust. You're not sort of forcing something up a hill. We all want to go there, and we can be different. And diversity is so powerful, but in diversity of ideas. But what you want is alignment of vision and purpose, because then it's more fun, I think.
And I think this like reminds me, so that like the purpose behind leadership as well. It's like, actually, we often think it's just managing people, but I think the legacy of leadership is the leaders that come after you, like, is actually people. It's like when you manage it's all about like the output. When you're leading people, you're leading them from one place to the next. And it's also about like the process of formation and development that happens along the way. And I think that like I work with various organizations around leadership pipeline development, particularly because there is a big gap. I think a lot of leaders forget, like there's just like they're so focused on a vision and just running the organization that they look back in 10 years time, 20 years time, and they go, oh, there's no one coming after me. Like I haven't developed that next generation of leaders who understand the vision, who have embodied the vision and can actually carry the mantle when I actually leave. And so that really affects the sustainability of organizations. But ultimately, if you as a leader have bought so much and you've spent so much of your life working towards this vision, you want to bring the leaders behind you who can actually help to carry that and not feel like they're a threat. I think you want to like bring people so that the vision continues beyond you.
Absolutely. And there's humility in that. It's like, I'm not special. I'm not special. That's not my role, is not to be special. My role is to be ordinary and to develop people and to share. Yeah. It's really interesting how often I come across this sense of, but no one else knows it or can do it like me, or we'll do it right. We'll do it the right way. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I
It's a
think
fast.
yeah, but if you have like a 10 times vision, if you have a big vision, you
Yeah.
actually I don't know, there's another book, but it's the kind of premise behind the 10 times is easier than 2 times is essentially that you have to have a different mindset. You have to start delegating to people anything that someone can do 80% as well as you, because
Yeah.
you no longer, like, this is why I would always encourage big vision. You can no longer function like, you take incremental steps. You actually have to function like an entirely different person and think differently in order to get to where you're actually wanting to go. And that requires a certain level of like trust and delegation and foresight into like what people need to know, maybe like 5-10 steps ahead of time, so that they can actually catch vision and they can help actually build the bigger.
Yeah. So then I take it that the work that you do not only helps people get clear, but it also potentially helps them build courage, because you need courage in order to take people on a journey and to develop them. You need courage. You need to understand yourself, trust yourself as much as other people. But it does take courage to have a vision and a purpose and to drive it.
Yeah, definitely. And it takes risk. Like, that you have to put something on the line, and it's hard because I think particularly as leaders, it's isolating
Yeah.
and it's vulnerable, and
Yeah. And it
part of
might
what,
fail.
and it might fail. Yeah, it's the reality of it. And I think, like, I saw when I was in London, there was much higher risk tolerance. I think coming back, it's like, actually, what can we risk? Like, there is more, like, ground to take. There's more courage that we can practice, so that I think the bigger the risk you take, the more it's like a muscle that you exercise. It's like you take risks and you're like, oh, that actually is not, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. And you might, again, like, this is why a lot of the top entrepreneurs have failed at some point in their life. They've gone bankrupt, is because
Mm.
they have actually hit rock bottom, and through that risk they've realized, oh, actually it's not the end of the world. Like, it's still worth trying again, and it's still worth getting back on the horse and like building something that might be more sustainable, or might be even bigger in the future. And I think what's on the other side of courage is so worth fighting for. Like, I want to see us like develop a generation of courageous leaders, because I think I started a blog called The Future We Build, and I use that language because we get to decide. We have agency. We get to decide what the future looks like, and all the leaders in the organizations that currently exist, and all the people working in them, they actually have a choice to kind of step into that courage and go, actually, what could this look like? And we have agency to actually build across Australia the businesses that should exist, the non-profit organizations, the churches that should have courage and should take risks to connect with the communities around them. And I think when you start to think about what the bigger picture looks like and the opportunity that exists, it just takes a little bit of courage to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think courage is a brilliant thing. But what I'm also hearing is that the role that you play is to walk alongside people doing this, that you can assist and support people, because it's a lonely journey out there
Mm.
being courageous.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, there's a lot of isolation, and I think just being able to instill some of that confidence and be a bit of a sounding board. My hope is that actually we're all surrounded by ecosystems, and I think the entrepreneurial space is really good at this. Like, people who are starting something new, like the new needs friends, and you can't. Anyone who started something new knows that you actually need people around you who'll be like, have you, like, what accountant are you using? Maybe I should,
Yeah.
are they good? Have you met this person? Can I introduce you to this person? Have you tried this, this funder, and seen if there's alignment in what they're going after? And you need people around you that actually just help to like give you courage by virtue of the fact that they've done it before, or they're a couple of steps ahead of you. And I think in the same way, like, my hope is that actually most leaders have those people around them, and it's not true. Like, it's not often not the case, but you often have to like bring people with you as a leader and have trusted advisors that you go to. And I've worked with enough leaders to see that in action. Like, the higher you get, the more lonely it gets, because you actually hard to tell who your friends are. And so it's the people who you were actually friends with beforehand that actually like end up being those kind of trusted advisors in the process. But to be able to walk alongside leaders and say, hey, here's some ideas. What you're going after is awesome. Like, this is, you've been building for 10 years. What else can we think about in this space to pivot and to like head in the direction that you're looking to go in? Or just to test, like soundboard and test ideas and help them cross like the next threshold of growth. Yeah. And I think there's nothing more exciting for me, is because I'm not the one with the ideas, but I love getting behind people who have ideas that could actually change the future. And so, yeah, it just feels like a privileged position. And I imagine, like, through Fantastic. The Huddle, being able to get along with leaders, help them just to think through like the next phase, and work through kind of points of tension.
Fantastic. So look, thank you so much. I think that that's a great place to end. I think people need people. You don't have to do this by yourself, but it is extraordinary and exciting when we can when we can share the journey with extraordinary thought leaders and entrepreneurs and exciting leaders who are going to change the world. How good is that?
So good. I'm really encouraged by the future. That's great.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Kate.
A joy. Thank you.